welcome back to episode 2. Let's call it episode 2.
I like it. That works for me.
Of Boundless Love of God, a study in the book of Hosea. Now, you know what a plot twist is, of course.
I love plot twists.
Yes, it's all. Well, I don't like them actually. I have to
not?
say, I don't always like them unless they go my way.
Ooh.
This one might go my way. We'll see. Of course, a plot twist is a radical change in the expected direction or outcome of a story. I should say I like them when it benefits me. If
Right.
it changes what I hoped was going to happen,
Then you don't
that's
like
a little scary, yes.
Yeah.
Of course, we see them in books. We see them in sporting events, in movies, for sure. Maybe you can think of a few of the greatest plot twists that you have read or watched, even right now as we're talking about this. But one of the most memorable probably comes from the Star Wars franchise, particularly the movie The Empire Strikes Back, which I remember seeing in the theaters, whatever year it came out. One of you was in your head saying, I can't believe you don't even know what year it came out, but whatever year it was.
I didn't see it in the theater.
I did,
That's
with
awesome.
my dad, and I remember this moment. So you could probably think of the moment I'm talking about. Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader have been engaged in this epic battle. It's toward the end of the film, and Vader says to Skywalker, one of the things Obi-Wan never told you is what happened to your father. And Skywalker, who I always think is kind of a whiny baby.
Me too.
Yeah. Is like, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. And Vader replies, no, I am your father. I think he says, Luke, I am your father.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember sitting in this movie theater looking at my dad like, what? How could this possibly happen? Nobody saw that coming. It's why it continues to be arguably the best Star Wars film of all 9. Can't believe there's 9.
You're going to get some emails on that.
I know.
maybe.
I
That's
welcome
impressive.
your emails. I'll just forward them to my husband, who will respond to you. I don't even know if that's his favorite, actually. So, here in Hosea chapter 2, we will see a plot twist that actually is even more significant than the plot twist we see in Empire Strikes Back. As we walk through the first part of this chapter in Hosea, it becomes clear what God must do to his people in response to their constant spiritual adultery. We'll remember from episode 1 of this that he calls them basically whores.
Yeah.
Yet as we get into the second half of this chapter, we see that God actually does the exact opposite of what we think he will do. So we're going to watch God do something that nobody would have seen coming.
This is another one of those, my favorite parts about the prophets, is that God continually acts in unexpected ways. Like ways that we would judge as probably the wrong decision. But he makes decisions that are more loving, more kind, more generous, more beautiful
Yes.
in the midst of it.
More
Love that.
rooted in, justice for all.
So again, we're going to be reading from the Message version. You're welcome to follow along at the bottom of the screen or open up your computer and download whatever version you want. Or some of you still have books called Bibles in your shelves, and you can open those too. Okay. So Hosea chapter 2, verses 1 through 23. Rename your brothers God's somebody. Rename your sisters all mercy. Haul your mother into court. Accuse her. She's no longer my wife. I am no longer her husband. Tell her to quit dressing like a whore, displaying her breasts for sale. If she refuses, I'll rip off her clothes and expose her naked as a newborn. I'll turn her skin into dried out leather and her body into a Badlands landscape, a rack of bones in the desert. I'll have nothing to do with her children, born one and all in a whorehouse. Face it, your mother's been a whore, bringing bastard children into the world. She said, I'm off to see my lovers. They'll wine and dine me, dress and caress me, perfume and adorn me. But I'll fix her. I'll dump her in a field of thistles, then lose her in a dead-end alley. She'll go on a hunt for her lovers, but not bringing down a single one. She'll look high and low, but won't find one. Then she'll say, I'm going back to my husband, the one I started with. That was a better life by far than this one. She didn't know that it was I all along who wined and dined and adorned her, that it was I who dressed her up in the big city fashions and jewelry that she wasted on wild belle orgies. I'm about to bring her up short. No more whining and dining, silk lingerie and gowns are a thing of the past. I'll expose her genitals to the public. All her fly-by-night lovers will be helpless to help her. Party time is over. I'm calling a halt to the whole business. Her wild weekends and unholy holidays. I'll wreck her sumptuous gardens and ornamental fountains of which she bragged. Whoring paid for all of these. They will soon be the dumping grounds for garbage, feeding grounds for stray dogs and cats. I'll make her pay for her indulgence and promiscuous religion, all the sensuous bowel worship, and all the promiscuous sex that went with it, stalking her lovers dressed to kill, not a thought for me. And not a thought for me. God's message. So right here's the first part, right? It's like the setup.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty intense.
It's
Let's just put
pretty
it that
intense.
way. It's like, okay, just in case you're missing the point, I'm gonna go long on this for 14 verses. That's what Hosea did.
Totally. And like, so I just want to be clear that like, this probably wasn't Danielle's choice of books to read.
I just think it's just so funny. It's so, if you were reading this by yourself, you'd be like, and I'm done. Yeah, but it's so good. It is.
It's good, and it's like there's this intentional vulgarity.
Yeah.
That we don't think comes from the text, the sacred text, but it's fully vulgar.
Yeah.
Right? Like Hosea is like, man, like go tell your mom that she's a whore.
Yeah, and bring her into court to be fully exposed in every way.
To lay it all out in front of everyone.
Yep.
Like, just let's make it clear who she really is. Mm-hmm. And let's make it clear that I'm the one who's only ever done anything for her. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you can feel Hosea's anger, like his rage. Like, that here's this person he went and picked from a whorehouse, right? Because he had the power to pick.
Yeah.
Went and picked her from a whorehouse, and now she's whoring. She's doing what she knows how to do. Mm-hmm. And
he's jealous.
He's angry.
Yeah.
He's jealous and angry and he's
hurt.
ticked off. And he's looking at his kids. He doesn't even know if the kids are his. He knows the first one is, but the others were born in a whorehouse. Mm-hmm. Like, he has no idea. So it wasn't like the first time she returned to a whorehouse after they got married.
Right.
Like, this was a consistent return to that life, right? Which is, again, studying sex trafficking, part of what you know about this reality is often when people are saved from sex trafficking, they'll go back into the industry because that's all they know.
Yeah.
Right? So like Gustavo Gutierrez would say, in terms of liberation theology, that you can't just take the shackles off of somebody and think that they're liberated.
Right.
Right? You have to free their psychology. You have to free their minds. Mm-hmm. You have to free their spirits. And you have to free their faith. Right? You have to free all of these things plus their chains. And then you finally have a liberated person.
Yeah.
All Hosea did in this was take off her chains.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this space, and Gomer's doing what Gomer does.
Yep.
And he's ticked.
Yeah. Right.
So then, come to verse 14. And now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start all over again. I'm taking her back out into the wilderness where we had our first date. And I'm going to court her. And I'll give her bouquets of roses. I'll turn Heartbreak Valley into acres of hope. She'll respond like she did as a young girl, these days when she was fresh out of Egypt. At that time, this is God's message still. You'll address me, dear husband. Never again will you address me as my slave master. I'll wash your mouth out with soap, and I'll get rid of all the dirty, false God names, not so much a whisper of those names again. And at the same time, I'll make a peace treaty between you and wild animals and birds and reptiles, and get rid of all the weapons of war. Think of it, safe from beasts and bullies, and then I'll marry you for good, forever. I'll marry you true and proper in love and tenderness. Yes, I'll marry you and never leave you nor let you go. You know me, God, for who I really am. On the very same day, I'll answer, this is God's message. I'll answer the sky, and the sky will answer the earth. Earth will answer grain and wine and olive oil, and they'll all answer Jezreel. I'll plant her in the good earth. I'll have mercy on no mercy. I'll say to nobody, you're my dear somebody. And he'll say, you're my God.
I think this is where we get a picture of the humanity of God.
Yeah.
You know, just the sort of what God is longing for, what we all long for, a connected relationship, you know, a relationship that's meaningful and loving and hope-filled and committed, right?
Committed at all costs, right? That verse, and it's one of my favorite verses where it talks about, I used to end my service in Los Angeles this way, like, there is nothing that can separate you from God's love, right? Part of why I love Hosea is because it's a story, it's a metaphor that embodies just how far you can go. And God still
will come after
responds like, nope, there's nothing you can do that'll make me unmarry you.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to pursue you like the first day I pursued you.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so beautiful.
So beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
Like, as I was reading it, I kept going back. Like, I was thinking about Julia Roberts in the big bathtub in Pretty Woman.
Oh yeah.
Like this like it triggers for me, right? Like this scene from Pretty Woman where, you know, like it goes beyond just she's this great woman that he's using.
Yeah. Yeah.
To, no, I love this person.
Yeah.
Right? Like, now how do I pursue you for real?
Yeah.
Now imagine for a moment, right? Like, put yourself both in Hosea's spot and in Gomer's spot, right? Like, Hosea's been asked to do this crazy thing. And now God's telling him, you're not taking her to court, Hosea.
Yeah. You're actually going to court her.
You're going to court her.
It's the reversal. It's the grand reversal. Yeah.
And those kids who you were just bad-mouthing their mom to, they're going to be mercy in somebody. Right? Like,
yeah.
It's
really
it's
powerful.
Really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and even just these sweet things, like, you'll address me, dear husband. Never again will you address me as your slave master. You know, we'll sort of wipe the slate clean, it seems like he's saying. You know, we'll wipe the slate clean and start again. And then I'll marry you for good forever.
For good forever. Yeah, you know what? The prophets, and if you go major prophets or minor prophets, like, the point of them is relationship with the divine. Like, that's the point. What God's really trying to say through these prophets is, I long for relationship with you still.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I haven't left you.
Yep.
You've left me. You're the one that walked away. You're the one who went to the whorehouse.
Yeah.
You're the prostitute. Like, I'm still here. I'm still the one pursuing you, trying to give us life, right? It's a beautiful story of relationship.
And almost in a way of saying, I'm still here, so don't be afraid to come back.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, it reminds me of the prodigal son, right? Where the son is afraid to go home for a little while because he's like, I can't go home.
Yeah.
I can't face them. I asked for everything, and I got everything, and I squandered everything. There's no way I can go back. But God is saying, through texts like these, come back. Come back. We can start again.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? Like, again, you know, we often read this as Gomer was a prostitute. She got saved from prostitution, then went back into prostitution one time. But chapter 2 doesn't say that. It says she kept prostituting all throughout their marriage.
Just like Israel did, right?
So like
Israel
did.
every time you turn around, they're turning their hearts and minds toward other gods.
Well, that's why we have, right? There's 12 minor prophets, I think. And
Yeah.
there's, I don't know how many major prophets, a lot. Like, we have like 16, 18 prophetic books of God saying the same thing in different parts of history to Israel running away from God again. And this is like, if you want to overlap the idea of the church or faith community in Israel, you can here. Like, this has been the reality of the church. The church has lost its way historically over and over and over. Before we were on the side of the anti-slave movement, we were on the pro-slave movement.
Yeah.
Right? Before we were on the side of anti-empire, we were the empire.
Yeah.
Right? So it's this back and forth that you can trace throughout the lineage of the church and people of faith.
Yeah.
We are Gomer. Right?
It's
We
the human
are.
condition to some extent.
It is.
Yeah.
And God longs to love us into relationship.
Yeah.
That's like something we all need to hear.
Mm-hmm. And something that if we are wise, we'll respond to as
Yeah.
well. And that I think, because I do believe, I think about those examples I have in my own life, those examples we have, and in sort of the history of faithful people for God. It's never simple, but it's beautiful to see a life well lived for God.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, fruit. That's sort of that fruit bearing idea that comes out
Absolutely.
in John, which we talked about last time. So
Yeah. So this is, this is that great plot twist.
Yep.
You come into verse 14 and you think God's going to lay the hammer. And
which any of us would do.
Right. Imagine if your spouse, imagine that, that's a funny thought to imagine. Imagine that he was like, I'm going to go be a gigolo.
Yeah.
Right? And
Right.
Brian gigolos himself out. What would you do, right? Both of us would be like, probably filing
Bye.
for divorce.
Right. Right.
For multiple reasons, right? It's not good for the kids. It's not good for, even if you could deal with it,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a good environment for your children.
Yeah.
So you'd be like, no, I'm out.
I mean, yeah.
So, right? That's what we would expect. We would expect to do exactly what Hosea threatens.
Mm-hmm.
Take them to court, make it clear how much of a piece of trash they are.
Yeah.
Right? I've sat in multiple counseling sessions with divorcing couples who are at that pinnacle of anger,
Mm-hmm.
of betrayal and brokenness and that sort of stuff. And at that pinnacle of anger, what they want more than anything is for the other person to feel the pain that they felt of the betrayal.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's happening for Hosea.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, right, this is where God acts differently than we act.
Yeah.
Instead, God says, no, I'm going to do everything I can to woo you back into my love, including starting from the very beginning, courting you, bringing you roses, making you know that you matter, making you know that you're important, making you know that you're my everything.
Yep.
And talk about a message for kids. I mean, I wouldn't read this text to your kids, but a message
In
of
this
kids
way.
to see
Yeah.
families falling back in love together.
Yeah.
Right? Fighting the fight to keep the relationship. And we can go to the extreme of betrayal, intimacy betrayal and that sort of stuff. But a lot of us live in really messy marriages,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my gosh.
Where it's, put COVID on top of all that, put the pandemic on top of already rocky relationships, and trying to figure out what do we do in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
how do we hold our house together? How do we hold the things together in our families with our kids and all of that
Yeah.
mess? And there's a message here for us too.
Mm-hmm.
That we double down and we seek to fall in love in new ways, that you do when's the last time you worked as hard in your relationship as when you first were trying
Yes.
to win a person over?
Well, and I think that is what that is a transformative thing as well. That is a countercultural way to approach marriage, to, instead of keeping a list of wrongs of the other, to go the extra mile in love. I always like to say to, I just said this a week ago, I was doing some premarital counseling, and I said to this couple, you've got to pick your battles. There's such wisdom to you have to pick your battles, and sort of, do I want the list of my loved ones' sort of grievances against me? No. So why would I keep one against him? How do we release this stuff regularly?
Yeah.
And so I think God is asking, or saying, I'm going to release this stuff because I care more about the relationship. But I will say it also would have been simpler if Israel would have just stayed with God from the beginning, right? It would have prevented a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. Yeah.
And don't hear us say that if you're in a bad marriage, you should stay in one. because we're not saying that either.
Right.
Right? I want to be super clear.
But a lot of people are in okay marriages that could be better.
Yeah.
Or
And there are some people who are in bad marriage who want to fight
yeah
for
yeah.
it, right? Who want to save it. And do that if you want, right? Like this
Yeah.
isn't about, we're not giving you marriage advice in this moment.
Right.
We're taking this text and saying, what does it look like to radically pursue God with the same love that God pursues you with?
Yeah.
And what might it look like for you to live that out in the world, right? So if there is somebody whose love you need to fight for, it may not be a spouse, it may be a friend, it may be somebody, like, are you going to take the challenge this week to fight for that love?
Yeah. Or if you need to be pursued anew by God, are you going to, can you let God catch you?
Woo ya.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So great love story. We'll jump in again tomorrow, but for today, may you go in peace knowing that you are loved beyond the most crazy thing you can possibly imagine that would separate you from that love.
You are God's dear somebody, as the last line
I love
says.
that. You're God's dear somebody. Go in peace.